Hey everyone, it's Alexander, the real Mr. Robinson. Welcome to the channel. God, can't people rob cars when I'm not recording? Like, is that seriously too much to ask for? Hey everyone, it's Alexander, the real Mr. Robinson. Welcome to the channel. So Zack Snyder's Justice League comes out next week on HBO Max at long last. Although I'm probably not saying that for the same reason you guys are. But before we get to the Snyder Cut, let's take a look at the theatrical cut to Justice League, which is one of the most infamous comic book movies ever made. And yes, I have this going on right here. I am rocking a fake mustache. I couldn't talk about Justice League without rocking the fake mustache. The one thing that has really cemented this movie to being the epic fail that it is. Now, I've talked about this movie a couple times on this channel. When I reviewed it in 2017, I said that I liked it, but I acknowledge that it's got a lot of problems, and when I say I like it for the most bare-bone reasons imaginable. And then as the years went by, there was really a disdain for this movie. Like, people have really started to turn on it. There's been a push for the Snyder Cut, which is coming out next week, as I said beforehand. We've started to learn more about the production and the behind the scenes of this movie. And people over time have said that it's one of the absolute worst comic book movies ever made. And I consider it a guilty pleasure in terms of movies from the last decade. And rewatching this movie, I still am in that mindset of, yeah, this isn't good. In fact, it's actually a lot worse than I remember it when I saw it in 2017, but I still had a lot of fun with it. And when I rewatched this movie and prepped for this video, I realized that the only reason I said this movie was good but not great in my original review was because Batman vs. Superman was so horrible that this didn't seem so bad by comparison. It's like, oh, it's the reason why I liked Transformers Dark of the Moon when it came out in 2011. I'm like, well, at least it's not Revenge of the Fallen. But looking back on it, as I said before, it is much worse than I remember, but I still don't think it's one of the worst comic book movies to come out. Now, I can absolutely understand the reasoning why people would consider this one of the worst comic book movies ever made. Not just the last decade, but overall. Because the behind the scenes of this movie, I would say, is on par, if not surpassing, the infamous story of how Alien 3 got made. Because this movie is a prime example of studio interference. When Batman vs. Superman came out, Justice League was already in production, and because that movie failed with audiences and critics, and because it underperformed and didn't break $1 billion, and got stomped by Captain America Civil War, Warner Brothers was in a panic, so they pretty much micromanaged this movie. And then tragedy struck when Zack Snyder's daughter committed suicide. And look, I don't like his DCU movies. I made it perfectly clear that I hate Batman vs. Superman, but I only hate the movie. I can't possibly hate Zack Snyder because I don't know him personally. And even with my criticisms of his movies in the DCEU, the things that he had to go through during that period of time when his daughter committed suicide, I would never want to wish any bad will towards anybody, and no matter how much I dislike a thing they make. I can't imagine the pain and suffering that he and his wife / producing partner Deborah Snyder had to go through. And what's even more disgusting when you look at all the behind the scenes stuff is that originally, when this movie was still in production and going through reshoots, the studio sold us on the idea that they're allowing Snyder to leave. So in his place, they brought in Joss Whedon to pretty much finish up the rest of the movie, which I know today Joss Whedon has a lot of negative press going against him, and rightfully so. But when you look at it through the eyes of Warner Brothers, you're like, hey, Joss Whedon made the Avengers the massive juggernaut that it is. So from a business standpoint, it would make perfect sense that they bring him on to fix up Justice League and pretty much finish it up. However, years later, when you find out that Warner Brothers actually used the death of Zack Snyder's daughter as a way to fire him or just get rid of Zack Snyder altogether, that's a really gross and disgusting approach to handling this movie. So with all the production and the fact that Ray Fisher has come out to say that Joss Whedon was gross, inappropriate, and just a horrible person during reshoots, and with some of the other cast coming out, this movie seemed like it was doomed from the start. And even then, when I say I like it in a guilty pleasure fashion, it really is hard to defend this movie at all, considering everything that we know about the production history. But as for the movie itself, again, I think it's perfectly fine. Now, when I say this movie's fine, I mean that as more of a backhanded compliment, because after seeing this movie again since its theatrical run, a Justice League movie should not be fine. A Justice League movie should be great. It should be fantastic. It should be an amazing experience. And this movie is just littered with a lot of problems, and a lot of problems that I've really started to take notice watching this again. I mean, obviously there's this whole controversy right here with Henry Cavill's mustache, which is a real indicator of who made what. Like the scenes made by Zack Snyder, Henry Cavill looks fine. He doesn't look weird at all. But then you have the scenes shot by Joss Whedon, and he has the Shrek mouth, and I'm just like, ooh, that's really disorienting and kind of creepy. And I feel like that opening sequence is just a clear indicator of the quality of this movie, where you see that fake CGI mouth and you're like, shit, this is probably not going to end well. Watching this a third time, because I've seen this movie 3 times, twice in the theater and once on HBO Max, it really is clear, more than ever, beyond the Superman stuff, which moments were shot by Zack Snyder and which moments were shot by Joss Whedon. I mean, there's the raid on Themyscira, which is clearly Zack Snyder's doing. The history lesson, that's Zack Snyder's doing. The big final battle is Zack Snyder's doing. But even then, with all those elements, Joss Whedon did touch upon those moments. Like the design for Steppenwolf is greatly different than what the original design was. And I know a lot of people criticize this look for Steppenwolf. And yeah, it's an atrocious look. And when you look at him, you're like, he's just a guy with a helmet. Why did he need to be CGI to begin with? Just put on some prosthetic makeup, give the actor a helmet, and it would have looked more convincing. Now, granted, the original design for Steppenwolf that we're getting in Zack Snyder's cut, I still think looks terrible. I'm not even going to compare these. It's like comparing Transformers 2 to Transformers 3. One might be better, but at the end of the day, it's still garbage. Then the history lesson scene, it's clear that Steppenwolf was supposed to be Darkseid, and the big final battle has this red tint to it. And outside of that, and the elements with Superman and humor and that Russian family that this movie pointlessly follows, that sequence is full-blown Zack Snyder. Like, it's very easy to tell who did what, and it really does result in a giant stitched up mess of a movie with 2 different people making it. I want to go back to the Themyscira sequence. That whole sequence, outside of the way Steppenwolf looks, is clearly Zack Snyder's. And it ends with the Queen alerting Diana Prince, once again played by Gal Gadot, that an invasion is coming. And then it abruptly cuts to a wacky news story about an old lady being interviewed that her husband got abducted by aliens or some shit. And it's clearly a reshoot, not just based on the humor, but by the fact that this is supposed to be the Daily Planet, and yet the set looks nothing like what we saw in Man of Steel and Batman vs. Superman. And then it's in that sequence also where you get a sense of the real work that Joss Whedon did and the terrible attempts at punch-up. Look, I like The Avengers. I love The Avengers, and I think Age of Ultron is a better movie than people give it credit for. But the punch-up in this movie just doesn't work at all, and it really has to do with the fact that Batman vs. Superman and Man of Steel were much darker movies, and this really contrasts to what Zack Snyder wanted to do. There's a conversation between Lois Lane and Martha Kent, why did you say that name? Where they're just talking about the fact that Clark Kent's gone, and Martha tells Lois that Clark promised Martha that Lois would be coming back with another Pulitzer Prize, and that Lois was the thirstiest woman that Clark has ever met. And then Martha realizes what she said and goes, hungriest, hungriest. And it's clearly a Joss Whedon moment. Watching this movie again, I was like, yeah, that doesn't fit at all. And then there's Barry Allen's awkwardness, which you could tell that was clearly Joss Whedon's doing. And this latest rewatch of Justice League, really made me not like Ezra Miller as Barry Allen. I mean, I'm gonna be honest right out the gate, I don't think he was really that good of a choice to play the Flash to begin with. But putting that aside, the awkward humor that they give him to where he's kind of on the spectrum, it gets annoying pretty quickly. I get that he's supposed to be the youngest of the group and he's supposed to be the wide-eyed kid by comparison of everyone else, but it just doesn't work. It comes across as too obnoxious. I don't know, it's not good. And then there's another conversation between two characters that really made me go, wait a minute. It's when Arthur Curry, Aquaman, and Bruce Wayne, Batman have a conversation, and Arthur just blurts out that he's Batman in front of people, and there's no negative repercussions whatsoever. Like, Bruce Wayne is perfectly fine that Aquaman just blew his cover to this small fishing village. I don't know, this Batman murders people, so maybe he just murdered everyone in this entire village. Maybe that's what will happen in Zack Snyder's cut, or maybe they'll just drop that dialogue altogether, because that makes no sense that Bruce Wayne's cover's been blown and nobody cares at all. So those are a lot of the problems that can be contributed to Joss Whedon. The bad dialogue, the awkward attempts at humor, this. But I feel like there's a lot of other problems that maybe the Snyder Cut will prove me wrong, but probably wouldn't have been good even if Zack Snyder had stayed through the entire project. The editing is atrocious. More specifically with scene transitions. Scenes will just randomly end. We cut to a different location without any sort of setup whatsoever. And one could argue that this is a result of the fact that this movie is kind of directed by two people, but Batman vs. Superman had some atrocious editing and scene transitions as well, so in this situation it's just really hard to tell. And then there's the awful CGI. I've mentioned this several times when I've talked about DCEU movies. With the exception of Aquaman, no movie has ever had good special effects. Man of Steel was fine in terms of special effects. Batman vs. Superman was horrible, especially with Doomsday and that entire finale at the end. Shazam was awful as well, but because that movie didn't cost as much, I can give it a pass. With Justice League, this has the worst special effects of all the movies in the franchise, but at the same time, it's not that much worse than Batman vs. Superman, in my opinion. Yes, Steppenwolf does look awful in this movie. Yes, there's a lot of horrible green screen, probably the worst green screen effects that I've seen in a blockbuster movie. And then some people have criticized the look of the parademons, how they don't look as scary as the parademons in Batman vs. Superman. And when I watched these movies back to back and even looked at images of the parademons in both movies, I'm like, they're the same look. They don't look any different from each other. This is really fitting for one of those Office memes where, tell me the difference between these two images. Cut away, they're the same. Like, I really can't tell the difference between the parademons. Now, Steppenwolf's design, it's like night and day compared to Batman vs. Superman and Zack Snyder's Justice League compared to the theatrical cut to Justice League. Like, that I get. But the parademon designs, they're literally the same in both movies. No difference at all. Just get out of here with that nonsense. Now, all that being said about this version of Justice League, it's a bad movie. No question about it. It is pretty bad. But it is fun at the end of the day. I enjoyed watching this movie more than I did Man of Steel and Batman vs. Superman. Man of Steel, out of these three movies, is the best made, and there's a lot of good ideas there, so it's probably the most competent of the bunch. Batman vs. Superman, I still think, is an absolute train wreck of a movie. It's dour, it's depressing, and it gives me a headache whenever I watch it, just because of how stupid it is. This movie here is stupid as well, but again, it's a lot more fun. I think it's trimmed down to a point where I was never bored. And despite everyone making fun of this on Superman, this is the first movie where I really was like, yes, Superman's here, finally! Because even though you've got the distracting CGI mouth, when Superman comes into the fight and goes, well, I believe in truth, but I'm also a fan of justice. Punch! I was like, Aquaman, all right. Like, really, this was the first time in the DCEU where I looked at Henry Cavill's Superman and went, that's my Superman right there. And yeah, that line before he punches Steppenwolf is pretty bad and corny, but it just felt right at home with Superman. So honestly, it was more this movie that made me want to give Henry Cavill another chance at Superman, because I realize, and I've said this with Man of Steel, he has great potential to be a fantastic Superman. It's just he's handled by people who don't understand the character, which makes me really concerned about what's going to happen with Superman in the Snyder Cut, because as I mentioned beforehand, I think Zack Snyder has proven time and time again that he hates Superman. And even though a lot of Joss Whedon's contributions to this movie are very out of place and stick out like a sore thumb, if making Superman act like the Superman I'm familiar with is his contribution, then I'll give him that. So yeah, at the end of the day, despite those good things that I said, this movie's not good. It was actually a lot worse than I remember before doing this video, but I still think it's a lot of fun. It has problems, sure. I can never defend the movie at all. Like, people that say it's terrible, I'm like, yeah, it's bad. Why would I even defend it? But at the same time, I don't feel like it's one of the worst comic book movies ever made. I'd rather watch this over Halle Berry's Catwoman, Josh Trank's Fantastic Four, X-Men Origins Wolverine, Spider-Man 3, X-Men Last Stand, X-Men Dark Phoenix, Superman 4 Quest for Peace, Batman and Robin, Supergirl. I feel like in terms of bad comic book movies, this is more mid-tier or higher tier. Again, within bad comic book movies, because it is not a good movie at all. And yeah, it really is hard to try to defend this movie, even if it's with faint praise, because again, I like this for the most bare-bone reasons imaginable, which, if there's one thing that makes me hopeful about Zack Snyder's Justice League, I would love for his cut of Justice League to be a great movie, just so I can say I like Justice League without feeling embarrassed when I say it. Because every time I say I kind of like this theatrical cut to Justice League, a little piece of me dies because I know it's not a good movie. And I just want to crawl inside a hole and hide for a week because I feel like there's an angry mob of Snyder fans coming after me every time I say, I kind of like this movie. Again, it's not good. I would never defend it at all, but it is the prime definition of a guilty pleasure. I do not think it's as bad as everyone says it is, but to say it's good is me lying to myself. And there you go. That's my review for the theatrical cut to Justice League. So now Snyder's Cut's coming out next week. I want to believe. I want it to be a great movie. I want to be hyped for it. But between Batman vs. Superman, how much I hate that movie, and the non-stop campaigning from fans of release the Snyder Cut, release the Snyder Cut, release the Snyder Cut. I just want this to be done. I just want to see this movie, get it over with, move on with my life, focus on other things that I enjoy. So here are my final words before we go into next week with Zack Snyder's Justice League. I don't think it's going to be a good movie. If it does end up being better than the theatrical cut of Justice League, it'll be better by a fraction of a hair, because after Batman vs. Superman, I have no faith at all that this would be a good movie. But I will go into it with an open mind, much like I did with Wonder Woman when I thought that movie was going to be terrible. And if the result of Zack Snyder's Justice League is the same as Wonder Woman and it ends up being great, I will tell you guys, I was not shy at all in saying that I was not looking forward to Wonder Woman, but ended up loving the movie. And I think that's one of the best movies of the last decade. So I will be open-minded about Zack Snyder's Justice League because I want to love it. I want to be on board with everyone else who's excited for this movie, but I just don't have that much faith in it. So we'll see what happens. March 18th, it's going to be an interesting day. But before we get to Zack Snyder's Justice League, I want to hear what you guys think about the theatrical cut to Justice League. If you've seen it, what did you think? If you despise this movie at all, are you just angry with me that I don't hate it and that you want to rip this mustache off my face? Well, too bad, because I did it first, so haha. But seriously, just let me know what your guys' thoughts are in the comments below. And until next time, this is the real Mr. Robinson telling you there is only one. Hello everyone, I just want to thank you all for watching my recap to Justice League, the theatrical cut. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share me with your friends. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, go check out my Twitch channel, and support me on Patreon. I'll see you guys in the next video, but until then, enjoy the rest of your day and take care of yourselves.